scary and true horror story about a train. Our story begins in a small railway station in the countryside, a seemingly ordinary place, but one that holds dark secrets in its metal and wooden bowels. Shadowville Station, as it is known to the locals, has a sinister reputation that stretches back decades. Built at the end of the 19th century, the station has been the scene of countless tragedies, from fatal accidents to mysterious disappearances. The tracks that cut through the small town seem to have a life of their own, whispering stories of pain and suffering to those who dare to pay attention. It is in this setting that we meet our protagonist, Sarah, a young investigative journalist who has decided to spend a night at the station to unravel the mystery of the ghost train. Sarah has always been skeptical of supernatural stories, but something about this particular legend piqued her curiosity. Perhaps it was the impressive number of witnesses over the years, or maybe it was just her journalistic instincts sniffing out quite a story. Whatever the reason, she was determined to uncover the truth behind the spooky tales. Armed with her camera, recorder, and an extra dose of courage, Sarah settled onto a worn bench on the platform, ready for a long night's vigil. The air was heavy, charged with an almost palpable tension, as if the very atmosphere knew that something extraordinary was about to happen. The hours dragged by slowly, the silence of the night occasionally broken by the distant hoot of an owl or the creak of the old station's wooden beams. Sarah fought sleep, her heavy eyes refusing to close, fearful of missing any sign of the phenomenon she had come to witness. It was then, shortly after midnight, that she heard it. A distant sound, almost imperceptible at first, but gradually growing louder. It was the unmistakable sound of an approaching train, the rhythmic click-clack of wheels on rails echoing in the darkness. Sarah felt her heart racing, a mixture of excitement and fear coursing through her veins. She grabbed her camera, ready to capture the moment, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to witness. Out of the fog that had suddenly formed, came a sight that defied all logic and reason. An old train from a long-forgotten era glided silently along the tracks, emanating a spectral light that seemed to suck in all the darkness around it. The windows of the carriages were blurred, but Sarah could swear she saw silhouettes moving behind them, ethereal figures that seemed to oscillate between existence and the void. The train slowed down as it approached the platform, and it was then that Sarah saw something that chilled her blood. The conductor, a skeletal figure, dressed in a faded uniform corroded by time. His eyes were empty wells that seemed to stare straight into the young journalist's soul. With a slow, deliberate gesture, the ghostly conductor opened the door of the first carriage, as if inviting Sarah to board. At that moment, all the stories she had heard about the ghost train came flooding into her mind. They said that those who boarded were never seen again, condemned to wander the tracks of the afterlife forever. Sarah knew she should run, that she should turn her back and run away from the nightmare that had materialized before her. But something kept her paralyzed, as if an invisible force was pulling her towards the train. She took a hesitant step towards the platform, her hand shaking as she held the camera. It was then that a shrill scream cut through the air, coming from inside the train. It was a sound of pure terror and anguish, as if all the lost souls on board were crying out in unison. That was enough to break the trance Sarah was in. She fell backwards, tripping over her own feet and falling backwards onto the cold floor of the platform. By the time she managed to get up, the train was already moving again, gliding away from the station with the same supernatural speed with which it had arrived. In a matter of seconds, it had disappeared completely, swallowed up by the mist and darkness, leaving only the distant echo of its ghostly whistle. Sarah stood there, trembling and panting, trying to process what had just happened. Her rational mind struggled to find a logical explanation, but there was no denying what her eyes had witnessed. The ghost train was real, and she had almost become one of its victims. With trembling hands, she checked her camera, praying that she had captured some evidence of the supernatural event. To her horror and fascination, the images were there. The spectral train, the skeletal conductor, the silhouettes in the blurred windows. She had concrete proof of the ghost train's existence. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself obsessed with her experience. She plunged headlong into her investigation, interviewing other witnesses, researching historical records and looking for any information that might shed light on the mystery of the ghost train. Her findings were as fascinating as they were disturbing. Apparently, the train had a history going back more than a century. According to the records, in 1897, a terrible accident took place on that same railway line. A night train, carrying more than 100 passengers, derailed on a dangerous curve and fell over a cliff. There were no survivors. The circumstances of the accident were suspicious, with rumors of sabotage and conspiracy circulating at the time. Some said that the conductor had gone mad, deliberately driving the train to destruction. Others spoke of an ancient curse, awakened by the construction of the railroad on sacred land. Regardless of the truth behind the tragedy, it seemed that the souls of the victims were condemned to eternally relive that fateful journey. But the story didn't end there. Sarah discovered that, over the decades, there had been countless reports of people claiming to have seen or even boarded the ghost train. Many of these people mysteriously disappeared, while others returned changed, as if they had aged years in just one night. A pattern began to emerge in their accounts. The train seemed to appear to those who carried a weight on their souls, people tormented by guilt, remorse, or loss. It was as if the train offered a chance of redemption, or perhaps eternal punishment, depending on the perspective. The further Sarah delved into her investigation, the more she felt she was only scratching the surface of a much bigger mystery. The ghost train was not just a supernatural apparition, but a portal between worlds, a physical manifestation of the limbo between life and death. And she had been one step away from crossing that fine line. The implications of her discoveries were overwhelming. If the ghost train was real, what else could exist beyond the limits of our understanding? What other supernatural forces could be operating in the shadows, invisible to most, but terrifyingly real to those who encounter them? Sarah knew she had stumbled upon something much bigger than a simple horror story. She had evidence in her hands that could shake the foundations of reality itself. But with this knowledge came a terrible dilemma. Publicizing his discoveries could bring fame and recognition, but it could also attract unwanted attention. What if there were hidden forces at work to keep the ghost train a secret? What if, by exposing the truth, she became a target? In addition, there was the ethical question to consider. Revealing the existence of the ghost train could lead desperate people to search for it, risking their lives in the hope of a second chance or a meeting with deceased loved ones. Sarah found herself at a crossroads, weighing up the consequences of every possible decision. It was then that something unexpected happened. One evening, while working late on her article about the ghost train, Sarah heard a familiar sound coming from far away. The click-clack of wheels on rails, the melancholy whistle cutting through the night. Her blood ran cold. She ran to the window, and there it was, the ghost train, gliding silently down the street in front of her house, where there should definitely be no tracks. The skeletal conductor stared at her from the cab, his empty gaze seeming to penetrate her soul. At that moment, Sarah understood. The train hadn't finished with her. Her journey had only just begun. The phenomenon of the ghost train is not something isolated. Throughout history, there have been countless reports of similar apparitions in different parts of the world. In England, for example, there is the legend of the Taunton Ghost Express, a train that supposedly disappeared with all its passengers in 1800, and which has since been seen occasionally crossing the Somerset Plains. In Russia, stories about the Trans-Siberian ghost tell of a spectral train that appears on the coldest nights of the Siberian winter, carrying the souls of those who died during the construction of the railroad. And in Japan, the Yurei Densha, or ghost train, is said to be a manifestation of the restless souls of railway accident victims. Dear viewers, we have reached the end of our exploration into the fascinating and terrifying world of the ghost train. We hope that this journey has aroused your curiosity and made you reflect on the mysteries that still surround us. If you enjoyed this content and want to continue exploring the enigmas of the unknown with us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave your like. Your comments and opinions are very important to us, so don't hesitate to share your own experiences or theories in the comments section below.